Without any further ado, it's my good fortune to bring Garrett Watson onto the program. Garrett, welcome to Sound Retirement Radio.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, I'm excited to get into this conversation. In fact, some of the members of our community, I've been telling them that I was going to have you on to talk about tax policy and what we might see from the current administration. And so I'm really looking forward to digging into this. Maybe we could just start out, share with us some of the highlights. What are you seeing coming from President Biden's camp regarding tax policy?
Yeah, it's a really relevant issue in D.C. right now on the policy side of things. The president, when he ran, of course, last year, made tax policy a pretty big part of his agenda. He had about $3 trillion worth of tax changes during his campaign, and we're now hitting the point in his presidency where he's looking to bring those proposals to life. So from a high level this year, of course, we had a $1.9 trillion rescue plan that had a lot of tax relief in it. To fight the coronavirus and deal with the pandemic, and the hope is within the White House that there will be two large follow-up packages that will include a mix of both spending and tax changes. This first one that we've heard a lot about, of course, in the media and elsewhere, is the American Jobs Plan, also known as his infrastructure plan, where he's pairing primarily his corporate tax changes in that package, along with a little over $2.5 trillion of spending on infrastructure and a variety of other things. And then later in the year, we have fewer details on this, but we've been hearing that the White House will be proposing what they're tentatively calling the American Family Plan, which will be a more individual-focused spending bill that will include individual tax increases. And all of this has been really consistent with what he campaigned on, which is raising taxes on higher earners and providing benefits in the tax code to those who are earning less. And what's been surprising is how consistent he's been on that since the beginning.
Yeah, and so raising tax on higher earners, everything that I have been hearing is for people earning more than $400,000 per year is the way that he's been framing that. Is that what you've been hearing as well?
That's right. That's his tax pledge that he started mid last year, primarily aimed at those earning over $400,000. And a big part of the debate has been how do we think about the indirect effects that these tax hikes will have on folks who earn less, and whether or not those effects will be whether they're worth considering and how large they will end up being in combination with the spending.
Yeah. So before we start drilling into some of these things like the American Family Plan or the American Jobs Act or the infrastructure plan, as you call it, just from a timing standpoint, I think I had read that President Biden said that he wanted to make sure the economy was healing and recovering from COVID before we saw any tax increases. Do you guys think we're looking at legislation before the end of 2021, or do you think we still have time to do maybe some tax planning this year? What do you think we should be planning for from a timing standpoint?
Yeah, that's a good question. There definitely has been sensitivity by members of the administration and within Congress about making sure we're not raising taxes too far, too fast. And I think that will be part of the discussion as these proposals head to the Hill and turn into formal legislative language. There has been some worry, of course, that some of these tax changes might be made retroactive to the beginning of this year. We generally think that's probably unlikely. Not that it has no chance of happening, but it's more likely than not that this legislation will pass through closer to the end of the year, and that makes retroactive changes less likely. It's more likely that any tax changes that do happen either in one or both of these packages will start at the beginning of 2022. Last thing is there has been some discussion about phasing in some of these tax increases, though the exact details may have to be worked out. So it's possible, especially if the economy is not as strong as expected at the end of the year, that they will phase in some of these so that folks have a little more breathing room over the next couple of years.
Okay. So let's start, because I think a lot of the people that listen to this show are just getting ready for retirement. So let's start with the American Family Plan. What are some of the tax changes individuals should be expecting under the American Family Plan? Some of the things that President Biden campaigned on.
Yeah, on the individual side, the big things we're expecting is an increase in that top individual income tax bracket. Before the 2017 tax law, it was 39.6%. Currently, it's sitting at 37%. So we expect that will be brought back up to 39.6% for those earning over $400,000 a year, and that will basically just be a reversion of what it was prior to that tax law. The other big area that the administration and Congress is really interested in is changing the tax treatment of capital gains. Currently, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, capital gains and dividends that are held for longer than 1 year get a preferential tax rate of 20% or 23.8%, depending on your tax bracket. They're looking at potentially raising those rates all the way up to ordinary income tax rates for those who earn over $1 million a year. So relatively small segment of taxpayers, but a big potential change.
Well, so talking about capital gains, for a lot of people, I mean, for people in the lowest income bracket, they pay 0% long-term capital gains. And then as their income goes up, I would say a lot of people are in that 15% bracket. And then right now, the highest would be 20%, and then maybe an additional 3.8% on the net investment income. Is that kind of the way that you understand it?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So for a lot of people then, 15% is pretty attractive from a long-term gains standpoint historically. Is there talk? Now, you said the top tax rate going up to the ordinary income tax rate if you're over $1 million, but what about just for the average Joe? Are they going to keep the capital gains rate at 15%, or do you think it's going to go up to 20%? I've heard 24%. What do you think is going to happen to long-term capital gains rate for the individual, that average person?
Well, so under the president's tax pledge, he's been pretty clear that he's not going to be proposing a tax increase on those earning over $400,000. So we expect those in the 0% or the 50% tax bracket for long-term capital gains will likely stay there. There has been some talk on the Hill about raising it up a bit, potentially for those at the very top, but it does seem like Congress is respecting that tax pledge, and I would say it's unlikely that we'll see any dramatic change in capital gains outside the very top, earning over $1 million a year.
Okay, and a $1 million adjusted gross income, then you're going to get hit with potentially 39.6% plus an additional 3.8%, because that net investment income tax is going to stay there as well. Then.
That's right, and the other thing to note, because there's some confusion on that, with that top ordinary income tax rate. The 39.6 is likely inclusive of the net investment income tax. So no need to worry that'll be on top of it, especially in the context of capital gains.
Okay.
Yep.
But
At
again,
least during the campaign, that's how they proposed it.
But again, most of the people that we serve, I don't think they're making more than $1 million a year. I mean, they're kind of the millionaire next door, in that they've saved a lot of money for retirement, but their incomes aren't necessarily high. And in fact, their incomes are winding down. Is there anything in this proposal or in the plan that you think could impact people that are making less than $400,000 a year?
There's a couple of things. One, where we've heard less detail that we're going to get more detail on, is proposed changes to what's known as step-up in basis, where if you have a capital gain and you pass it on to an heir when you pass away, under current law, that basis is adjusted based on the value of that gain when the inheritor gets it. The president and policymakers in Congress have proposed eliminating that for some taxpayers, but they've been really unclear about what segment of the population might be having to deal with that. It does sound like there will be pretty generous exemptions, but that is something I think to keep an eye on, because we have not gotten details on exactly how they will calculate that. There was a proposal under the Obama administration a few years ago that would have, for example, provided a $100,000 exemption. If they adopted that could affect a lot of folks who have gains that they'll be passing on to their heirs. But that's just worth watching to see how much of an exemption will be provided for that.
Yeah.